Our region is growing, and KREM 2 News is tracking the impacts as a part of our Boomtown series. We are digging deeper into some of the biggest growing pains throughout our region.
There's so much more traffic. Like, the population is just growing drastically.
In this special edition of KREM 2 News, we have an in-depth look at the problems and the solutions.
We've seen increases in property crime. We've also seen increases to a lesser extent in violent crime.
We're following the money in the efforts to clean up the I-90 homeless encampment in Spokane.
We are seeing more and more individuals finding themselves unsheltered.
And hearing from the mayor and homeless advocates on the biggest roadblocks they're facing.
If we don't start housing them, the numbers just increase every single year.
Commerce hasn't been critical of any other city outside of Spokane.
So why is that then, do you think?
I think it's political.
And the progress on the North Spokane corridor,
where you can flow at relatively high speeds without interruption.
This is Boomtown. As the population continues to grow here in the inland Northwest, so does the amount of people experiencing homelessness. Thank you for joining us here for this KREM 2 News Boomtown special. I'm Tim Pham. Over the last several years, the city of Spokane and Washington State have poured millions of dollars into possible solutions. Whitney Ward takes a closer look at the money that's been spent and if it's making a difference.
It has become the symbol of homelessness in Spokane, a sprawling camp of tents and broken down RVs along I-90 known as Camp Hope.
I sure hope this camp is closed before the end of 2023.
What started as a protest last winter took on a life of its own on Department of Transportation land, but within city limits. And homeless advocates like Jules Helping Hands say the process to move people into more permanent housing is a slow one.
There's nowhere for them to go. If we don't start housing them, the numbers just increase every single year.
But the city hit a setback last week when the Hope House Women's Shelter announced it would be forced to close at the end of January because of a lack of funding.
Unfortunately, the need is great and the funds weren't there.
It means more than 80 women currently staying at the shelter will be forced elsewhere, and up to 35 employees could also be left without a job.
What is your biggest worry come January 31st?
Well, that we'd close and that not all of our women will have a safe place to go.
But city leaders say there may still be hope for Hope House as the 2023 budget is still being finalized. Meantime, homeless advocates across the city believe as Spokane's population continues to boom and the homeless population right along with it, city leaders will need to start focusing more on long-term housing solutions instead of just shelter beds. Still, the brand new Trent Avenue shelter is filling a need for nightly bed space. It's also now being touted as a resource center, a model city leaders are borrowing from Houston, Texas.
They move people indoors into a navigation center with the expectation that you're going to be assessed there, you're going to be connected to services, and that is where you wait out your housing options. And it's a much better plan than leaving them in an encampment out in the middle of a field in our winter months.
But despite the new shelter, Camp Hope remains. The mayor says DOT's refusal to clear it has cost taxpayers more than $500,000 in garbage cleanup, private security, and police overtime.
We've spent now over $600,000 on their property and the impact the activity on their property is having on the neighborhood and on businesses.
And that's not the only money being spent. Earlier this year, state legislators approved $144 million specifically to tackle homelessness in state-owned right-of-ways, like this one where Camp Hope now sits. Of the $25 million allocated to Spokane County, $14 million went to the Catholic Charities Catalyst Transitional Housing Project at the Old Quality Inn on Sunset Hill. Empire Health received almost $3.5 million for services at Camp Hope and assessments to get people staying there into permanent housing. That includes $1 million that went to Jules Helping Hands. And the city of Spokane is also in talks with Commerce to finalize $1.5 million for 30 beds at the new Trent shelter, although the mayor says at least one request to pay for improvements like indoor bathrooms, showers, and kitchen space was denied.
Are we working well enough with Commerce to be able to take advantage of those dollars?
Well, we're working with Commerce every week.
They have been critical of Spokane, though, in how the city has addressed some of these issues.
What I find interesting about that question, though, is that Commerce hasn't been critical of any other city outside of Spokane and hasn't blamed any city outside of Spokane for their homeless issue based on an administration or a mayor.
So why is that then, do you think?
I think it's political.
The mayor is also critical of who is getting a piece of that Commerce funding.
I think it's interesting to note that Jules Helping Hands is the nonprofit that started the protest against the city for not having enough low barrier beds, and now they're benefiting from that protest by getting $1 million from Commerce.
The city has criticized you for starting this as a protest in the first place. They have criticized you for getting a contract with Commerce. What do you say to that?
The same thing I say always. I've been doing this forever. Like, this is what I do. If I had a magic wand and could just wave it over everything, I'd take the homeless services out of control of the city and put it in control of a nonprofit like the Houston model, where it doesn't change with every political climate.
In the meantime, as 2022 winds down and 2023 draws closer, all sides agree Spokane needs more housing at every level to fully address homelessness. But for that, they know there is no easy answer.
We did reach out to the Department of Commerce with the mayor's claims that the city is being treated differently for political reasons. They said, quote, Spokane is not being singled out. We are doing this work in 5 counties and multiple communities, and challenges exist everywhere. What is unique about Spokane is that its encampment on state right-of-way is the largest in the state, which makes it an exceptional challenge. Still ahead, the homeless encampment near I-90 in Spokane is one of the largest in the state. It's on WSDOT land, which means if and when the camp moves out, WSDOT would be responsible for footing the bill to restore the property.
Dump fees, hazardous waste removal and fees that are separate from just dump fees, and then repairing the areas.
I follow the money and look at how much the Transportation Department is spending on homeless issues and how a new state initiative is relieving some of that burden. We have much more Boomtown coverage available for you to watch right now on KREM 2+. To find it, just navigate to the News tab at the top of the screen, then scroll down to our Boomtown playlist. If you don't yet have KREM 2+, you can download it now on Roku or Amazon Fire. Our Boomtown series is committed to tracking growth in our region, and sometimes that means talking about the unintended consequences of rapid growth. Take a look at these 2 graphs here. This one shows Spokane County population. This one shows the homeless population from 2010 to 2020. Now, at first glance, when you look at both of these graphs, you'll see that both populations grew. But here's what's interesting. If we merge these 2 graphs together and take a look at percent change, you can see that the homeless population is outpacing our growth population. Today, the majority of the homeless population are staying at the encampment off of I-90. It's one of many camps on WSDOT-owned land in the state. Once it's cleared out, WSDOT will be responsible for cleaning up the site. I followed the money to look into how much the agency has spent on cleaning up camps across the state. This time of year, there's never a quiet moment at Liberty Tire and Auto Service.
This early snow really caught everybody off guard.
It's not just the weather that caught the business off guard, but an ongoing nuisance in their own backyard.
We had people, living in our building. They broke into our building, tore a door off. They burned a car down that was in our parking lot.
That's not even the full list of criminal activity since the homeless camp off of I-90 moved in.
Well, that's where they cut it.
It's hurt the bottom line of the small business. Liberty estimates he's lost at least $16,000 and is losing customers too.
There's people that don't want to come down into this neighborhood. They don't want to leave their cars, which you can't blame them.
Over the last year, there's been a lot of finger pointing of whose responsibility it is to remove the camp. WSDOT knows long-term, encampments like the one in Spokane are not safe.
Just not a good location for those that are unsheltered to be within our operating right of way.
Pasco Bakotich is WSDOT's Director of Maintenance and Operations. He's been with the agency for 36 years. For the last 7 years, he's overseen the state's maintenance operations.
But in that 7 years, we are seeing more and more individuals finding themselves unsheltered.
And a popular place, while unsafe, is on WSDOT's land, what they call the right-of-ways. This means WSDOT is constantly having to remove camps and make them less desirable for people to reoccupy.
To restore them to their original intent, which is the roadside of a traveling highway.
You can imagine cleaning up a camp is as expensive as it is hazardous. I took a look at how much WSDOT spent in the last 8 years cleaning up camps. In 2014, the agency only spent under $500,000. And in 2022, they've spent more than $2.5 million. And that number will likely grow even higher before the end of the year.
Our Department of Transportation has worked as hard as they can, but they didn't have the person power to do it. The legislature now put in $300 million to allow them to do it, and that's why this is being successful.
Earlier this year, the legislature and Governor Jay Inslee launched the Right-of-Way Safety Initiative to remove people at camps like the one near I-90 into housing. So far, $143 million has been allocated statewide in 5 counties, including Spokane, receiving just over $25 million. The initiative is funded by the Department of Commerce with hopes to alleviate some of the burden off of WSDOT. I asked WSDOT if money is being taken away from projects like the North Spokane corridor to deal with homeless-related issues. They tell me no projects are being impacted at this time. But what is being impacted are the residents and small businesses near the encampment.
Just cleaning up this shelter is going to do nothing. They're just going to move somewhere else. I don't want this shelter to be just cleaned up, because all they're going to do is just move to another area.
Liberty is skeptical the initiative will actually get to the root of the crisis.
Nobody in the state of Washington that's in leadership must care. Is that I can't understand as a business and as much taxes as we pay as a small business that this kind of stuff's even allowed. I can understand homelessness, but this is beyond homelessness.
We also asked WSDOT East how much money it has spent on homeless-related issues in our region. On average, it's roughly $120,000 per year, but even that figure will change significantly because WSDOT is spending $30,000 per week on security alone at the I-90 encampment.
I had a couple times actually, a couple different occasions where my back window has been busted out. I've had to replace it.
Property crimes like car thefts and break-ins are on the rise all over Spokane, but especially in the downtown area. Still ahead in our Boomtown special, we dig deeper by taking a look at the numbers and find out what Spokane police are doing to stop vehicle break-ins and thefts. Thank you for joining us for this KREM 2 News Boomtown special. I'm Tim Pham. The growth we are seeing here in the inland Northwest can often come with growing pains, like an increase in crime. Law enforcement agencies across the state, including Spokane PD, are experiencing an officer shortage. Property crimes are up, with car break-ins and thefts also seeing some of the biggest increases. Channing Curtis dug deeper and found out what's going on and how police are tackling the issue with limited resources.
Smashed windows and hundreds of dollars in damage.
That's just the big nuisance of it all.
Having your car broken into is becoming more of a problem in Spokane, especially for people who work downtown.
I've had a couple times actually, a couple different occasions where my back window has been busted out. I've had to replace it.
Michael Owens is the chef at People's Waffle. He says his car windows have been smashed 3 times while being parked downtown.
And I'd say probably about 80% of our staff here has experienced it. Or there's days where I've come in and there's been 4 or 5 cars where you just see the windows just completely busted out. This whole strip seems to be like a really high area, especially around wintertime, you definitely see it pick up.
He normally parks his car just outside of the entrance to the restaurant, but that still does not put him any more at ease.
Being parked right here, I definitely am checking it every once in a while, just making sure my car is okay.
Michael and his coworkers aren't alone. This is a map generated by the Spokane Police Department to track crime. According to SPD, the downtown area has seen the biggest increase in property crimes and some of the highest numbers of vehicle-related crimes. But Corporal Nick Briggs says that this is partially due to the amount of cars in that area and that other neighborhoods are seeing similar trends.
There's no area that's immune, but there's also not one area where you can say, yep, that you're much more susceptible.
From January through October of this year, 3,538 vehicles have been broken into in Spokane. That's up by nearly 1,000 incidents from this time last year.
We've seen increases in property crime. We've also seen increases to a lesser extent in violent crime. And so we've had to move some resources because protecting people's physical well-being has to be our #1 priority.
Corporal Briggs says that even though people are calling to report these crimes, police are not able to respond to all of them in person.
Generally, when it comes to a vehicle prowling incident, an officer will not respond. An officer in person will not respond. That doesn't mean that there's not still a police report. Those police reports are taken through our crime check system. It also doesn't mean that they won't be investigated.
In Michael's case, the police did come, and since then he's noticed more officers downtown.
Since then, we've seen a more high volume area or traffic of police coming through the area more often, so which is more reassuring.
For context, according to SPD, the average number of law enforcement officers in a city is 2.4 officers per 1,000 residents. The Spokane Police Department has a ratio of about 1.55 officers per 1,000 people. SPD says they will be adding about 30 more officers to their patrol division in January. Most of these officers are already with the department and will be reassigned from other areas. It's an idea that's been talked about since the 1940s. The North-South Freeway promises to get people from Windermere to I-90 in 12 minutes. Crews broke ground in 2001, and today it's still not done. So why is it taking so long to build the 10.5-mile corridor, and when will you be able to drive on it? KREM 2's Kyle Simchuk went to the Washington State Department of Transportation for answers.
So it is fully funded for completion. It will get built. So you've got 27 lights on division, takes anywhere between about 30 and 45 minutes. It's a lot of truck traffic. All of that will be diverted onto the North Spokane corridor, free flowing, reduces emissions, travel times.
Coming up in our Boomtown special, hear the latest estimate on when the freeway will open. In this KREM 2 News Boomtown special, we continue to track how the growth across the region is impacting you and your family. As more people move here, our roads are becoming more crowded, that's for sure, especially in places like Division Street. The North-South Freeway will dramatically reduce that congestion, but after decades of construction, it's still not ready. KREM 2's Kyle Simchuk found out why and what's next.
Imagine getting from Windermere to I-90 in 12 minutes. That's the promise of the North-South Freeway, an idea first conceived in the 1940s, a project that broke ground in 2001, and a corridor that to this day is still not finished, a fact that's become a popular punchline for Spokane memes.
You know, I like to reference it as a mythical unicorn, but it's going to come to fruition. We're going to see the fruits of the labor and it finally connect to I-90.
Washed-out communications manager Ryan Overton says the freeway should be finished by 2028. That's the latest estimate, at least. He says there's a reason it's taken decades.
The simple answer of why it's taken so long is funding has been sprinkled out through so many years. So since 2001, there has been so much money allocated, which is why it wasn't done all at once. The funding wasn't available, you know, right in 2001.
Funding for the entire $1.5 billion project is now secured, and crews are making progress. You may have noticed them building this latest stretch next to Spokane Community College. This will eventually connect to the north and south.
So that'll be every project under contract or under construction in the next 12 to 18 months. So it'll be very visible, and this will be getting done.
The freeway crosses the Spokane River and snakes through several neighborhoods. WashDOT had to purchase roughly 600 parcels to clear the way for the 10.5-mile freeway.
We work with the homeowners very closely, not only to purchase the property, but to help with relocation.
It's why the state owns the lot people at Camp Hope are living on. This is where the freeway will eventually connect to I-90. WashDOT still has about 35 more properties to buy, mainly to the south of Spokane Community College. Any leftover land that the state has once the corridor is complete can go back to the neighborhoods.
So we're looking further ahead at even restoring and reconnecting places like the East Central neighborhood. There's going to be some design work and some funding for a land bridge.
Once finished, the freeway itself will change the way Spokane's growing population travels north and south.
It's a huge difference. You've got 27 lights on Division, takes anywhere between about 30 and 45 minutes. It's a lot of truck traffic. All of that will be diverted onto the North Spokane corridor, free flowing, reduces emissions, travel times, and it allows us to reimagine other places such as Division.
The 6-lane, 60-mile-per-hour freeway will also provide faster, easier access to neighborhoods along the way.
It opens up new opportunities and economic opportunities for places like Hilliard. You know, people are going to be more readily available to access the Hilliard neighborhood, so we'll likely see growth in that area.
We're already seeing that growth across the entire region. More cars and semis squeezing onto arterials which weren't designed to handle that much traffic. It's why the state says it's committed to finishing the North-South Freeway within the next few years. In Spokane, Kyle Simchuk, KREM 2 News.
Thank you for joining us for this KREM 2 News Boomtown special. We have much more Boomtown coverage available for you to watch right now on KREM 2 Plus. To find it, just navigate to the News tab at the top of the screen, then scroll down to our Boomtown playlist. If you don't yet have KREM 2 Plus, you can download it now for Roku or Amazon Fire. And be sure to keep it here on KREM 2 News for more Boomtown coverage. Thanks for watching.